Hello, everyone, and welcome to 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your host, Logan Landers, and today we're going to be talking about a very special ACC preview between the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets and the Boston College Eagles. Now, joining me today, usually we have my man Vincent Turner, the football encyclopedia, as you guys know, but I'm bringing on an expert, man. He's a guy that works with the Yellow Jackets. He's one of the sideline reporters, the pregame, and the postgame host. My dude, Mr. Wiley Ballard. How you doing, man?
Logan, I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me on, and I know it's no secret what happened at Georgia Tech. So I am appreciative we were doing a preview and not a review.
Because when we were talking, we were originally going to do this Clemson game, but I'm kind of glad that we kind of skipped this one out. Anyone that kind of saw the game or saw any of the score, it was a football game that looked like a basketball game. It was 73-7, I believe. Definitely one you like to forget about. At least on the bright side, though, you can say they did not get shut out. You can say that.
Yes.
At least hold your head a little bit higher.
A little higher. No, and again, I'll invoke an old adage I think most coaches would say is it's never as good as it seems when it's going well, and it's never as bad as it appears when it's not going well. Truth's probably somewhere in the middle, and I do think this is a team that, despite the difference in score when you're playing Clemson from what we saw a year ago, I do think they've gotten demonstrably better.
Yeah, without a doubt. But let's get into this game against Boston College. Let's leave the past where it needs to be in the past. Let's talk about the future, this upcoming weekend's game versus the Eagles. All right, so here we go, Boston College and Georgia Tech. So you're the expert on Georgia Tech, man. So what do you like about them? What do you think that they're going to be able to do to get the win, and what key players do you think are going to be able to stand out?
Well, I think first and foremost, you talk about the season as a whole thus far, and I think the biggest difference from what we saw a year ago is the offense. I was talking with Sean Bedford, our analyst, and it seems like the offense in 2019 was incompetent, or I should maybe not capable of doing some things. But they've gotten a freshman quarterback, Jeff Sims, in from Florida, from Jacksonville area, who initially actually was a Florida State commit, but wound up with the coaching change down in Tallahassee, ended up at Georgia Tech. So he's been a real revelation. He started every game this year, and he's had some freshman moments, most definitely. He had 8 interceptions in his first 3 games, but also showed some really special stuff down at Florida State, leading the second half comeback, and then had his best game to date 2 weeks ago against Louisville, where the offense put up 46 points, which is the most they'd had in a couple of years. So I think Jeff Sims is going to be a key factor. And if there's a second guy, I'd say it's another true freshman, in Jahmyr Gibbs. He's an in-state recruit, very, very big recruit for Georgia Tech. It was really kind of the gem of the 2020 recruiting class, and that was Tech's best class in 13 years since 2007. And again, under the first full recruiting cycle under Jeff Collins. So I think those two guys are going to be critical. But, it's funny, in the game against Clemson, it seemed like the offense really – the only 2 guys who got recurring touches were Jeff Sims and Jahmyr Gibbs. So in my mind, I'd like to kind of see the balance we've seen in some of the wins for Georgia Tech. It was against Florida State where Sims completed passes to, I think it was 10 different receivers or somewhere thereabouts. And then 2 weeks ago when they put up 46 points against Louisville, it was Malachi Carter, a junior wide receiver, really getting in the mix, making some big plays. Adonicus Sanders had a big third down catch. Dante Smith was a great change of pace back as kind of the I don't want to say third down back, but he was kind of the third option, really, along with Jemias Griffin. So I think for Georgia Tech offensively, as good as Sims and Gibbs are, and without a doubt they are the future of Georgia Tech football, I think that balance is what is what helped Georgia Tech find some success there in their 2 wins thus far. So that, in my mind, would be the key offensively. And for Georgia Tech defensively, I think they've got to try and find a way to get some pressure on Phil Jurkovec, who's Boston College's quarterback, transfer from Notre Dame, and I'm sure we'll get to him a little later.
Yeah, no doubt. But like you said, I do like Jeff Sims. He seems to really embrace the Georgia Tech culture. It's definitely a different culture as opposed to any other college in the state, as we're all accustomed to. That's one of the top. It's not just one of the, it's a prestigious sports, program as well, but the academics there, you got to have a heck of a brain to get in there. And, people always joke, like, man, Georgia Tech, they always lose or whatever. It's like, yeah, they might lose a football game, but they might be, running a company in about 5 years. So we'll see who's laughing at the end of the day. But I do like Jeff Sims. Like you said, he did have those 8 interceptions in his first couple of games, but that's just growing pains, though. There's a lot of ways that either freshmen go into college just blazing hot, who take over the country, or some might need a little bit of time to get, recognized with the playbook, their new players and coaches and whatnot. And I think that's what we're seeing here. But Jeff Sims is doing pretty good, though. He's already passed for over 1,000 yards this season. I do like Jahmyr Gibbs as well. He's right under the 300 yards plateau. So I think that just with a little bit of time, those two are really going to get a heck of a connection and really help out this Georgia Tech offense, which is, for years it's been based on the option and everything. And that, it worked well in the beginning, but towards the end, it was just like, man, what are we doing? But like you said, with the new coach and everything, he's trying to get a new culture in there, new identity and whatnot. And I think that those two guys are going to be leading the charge on that end. Also with Malachi Carter as well, catching the ball.
Yeah, and I think for Coach Collins, this is, a job he's wanted for a long, long time. He's an Atlanta native, grew up in Conyers. And I think, we were discussing, this Saturday prior to the game just about, look, I think guys like Paul Johnson, George O'Leary, Chan Gailey, Bill Curry, those are previous coaches for Georgia Tech who had some success, and they did such a great job for the school. And I think we can all look back and say, really appreciative of what they'd done. But, I kind of remarked this, again, prior to the game on Saturday, saying, Georgia Tech hasn't had many head coaches like Jeff Collins from an energy and a presentation standpoint. And, just kind of, I'll put it this way. I think the 4 names I mentioned previously, they had no problem doing press conferences. I think Jeff actually enjoys them. I think he views it as an opportunity, whether you're selling to recruits or selling to fans or just local Atlantans who might be considered coming out to see a game. I think he really takes advantage of that, of the media. And I think that, especially nowadays, is a big part of being a successful college football coach. I think really in the last, maybe 60, 70 years, the only other coach I'd put in that category for Georgia Tech is probably Pepper Rogers back in the 70s. And look, things were a little different, the type of reach you can have.
Right.
So I think that is something that, look, I know Jeff talks about it a lot, and he should. I mean, it's a huge part of this program, what it is, but I do think there is tangible on-field value, to the stuff that may be on paper off field. So I think it's heading in the right direction. And going back to Jeff Sims, look, I mean, there's Trevor Lawrence and maybe a handful of others, and there's everybody else. And I think Jeff has really shown a good ability to find a way to win games. I think you're looking at the 2 wins thus far have been huge second half comebacks against Florida State and Louisville. And we actually talked to Bill Curry about this a couple weeks ago, going to the Louisville game on our pregame show. And he said, look, he's got so many physical talents. He's got so much ability. But Coach Curry said he thinks that his greatest asset is really his even-keeled temperament, his low heart rate. And that is something, and again, I know this is quite the reach, but because we're talking to Coach Curry, he even kind of compared it a little bit to Johnny Unitas. And look, I'm not saying Jeff Sims is the next Johnny U or anything like that, but, any comparisons you can draw are good. And I think it's encouraging. And I think for a quarterback as young as he is, those are great signs. And keep in mind, Georgia Tech has some precedent for starting some really young quarterbacks. Joe Hamilton started as a redshirt freshman in '96, and Reggie Ball in 2003 won ACC Rookie of the Year. And I think we could be looking at a season just like that for Jeff Sims. And that is if Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't take it from him.
Yeah, definitely. Those two are going to be kind of linked together in that for their entire tenure with the Yellow Jackets, because they're both very highly touted prospects. A lot of the Georgia Tech faithful are loving these guys, hoping that they can, break out and hopefully get them to another championship in the next year or two. That's always the goal. You got to try and get to at least win your conference championship, and then we'll worry about the national a little bit later. But for this team, that's their goal right now, man. Try and get under Clemson's skin. Miami also, they've been very impressive. But But they're on the right track, though. They have a certain hype about them this season. They have a certain it just seems like it's a better culture, like we say, man. There's a better the team seems more kind of thrilled to be out there and play for Coach Collins and whatnot. And I like these players. They're very high energy. And I think, like I said, once they get a little bit more playing time and learn the playbook a little bit better, it's all going to start clicking for them. It might be a little bit later this season. It might be next season where it fully kind of you see it start working, but it is going to happen. I can fully attest to that. But let's talk about the Eagles, man. Let's talk about Boston College, who they're facing up against. Right now, they're tied with Tech in the ACC. They're 3-2 coming into this season. Boston College, they just came off of a loss to Virginia Tech this past week, number 23 ranked team in the country. So let's see. What do we like about them? What do we like about Boston College? So they got the quarterback with Phil Jerkovich, passed for 1,526 yards. Looking very solid on that end. David Bailey's leading the team in rushing with 189. And Zay Flowers, who people have heard his name a couple of weeks. He's got close to 5. He's got 462 receiving yards. He's starting to creep up there as kind of one of those sleeper picks in terms of possibly a potential late round wide receiver in a couple of years that gets drafted. And hey, he could very well do that. So what do you like about Boston College, and how can they beat Georgia Tech this next week?
Well, it's funny. We don't, from the Georgia Tech side, we don't see Boston College very often. In fact, the last time Tech went up and played a game in Chestnut Hill was 2007, and that was actually when Matt Ryan was under center.
Yep.
So that just tells you about how long it's been since Georgia Tech played a game in Chestnut Hill. Now, technically, they were the road team when they faced Boston College last, but that game was played in Ireland in 2016. But it's funny, again, like I said, we don't see Boston College every year, but, from afar, you're sitting there and saying, okay, Boston College, the one thing they love to do, run the rock. They run, right? Well, A.J. Dillon, who was probably one of the best running backs in school history for them, on to the pros now. And so that's when kind of my look, I knew he was gone, but, I kind of went slack-jawed when I looked at some of the numbers yesterday with what BC is doing offensively. They led the ACC in rushing last year. They are dead last this year. Yeah. Now, part of that is the loss of A.J. Dillon. Another part of that is a change in coach, as Steve Adazio, after 7 years, was let go. And now bringing in Jeff Hafley, who spent the last year at Ohio State and then the previous 6 or 7 in the NFL. So, some of that's a regime change. But in my mind, the biggest difference is who they've got at the quarterback position, and that's Phil Jerkovich. He's a guy, Notre Dame transfer, spent the last 2 years backing up Ian Book. And he's one of 6 quarterbacks in the country averaging over 40 pass attempts per game, threw for close to 350 yards last weekend in that loss to Virginia Tech. And he's a prototypical drop-back quarterback, 6'5", 230. And, I was reading an article earlier going into this game, and he was talking about how when he first heard about Boston College, he kind of shrugged his shoulders and says, no way. I really thought about him. I'm a Pittsburgh Panther guy. I grew up a big Notre Dame fan. I just whatever. He didn't even give it a second thought. But again, with the coaching changes, with the new staff coming in, and I think the biggest focus for him was, I want to get to the next level. I want to be the best quarterback I can be. And he thought his best opportunity was at Boston College. And so far, statistically, it's looked pretty good. He certainly get the opportunity to use some of those weapons. And I think, transferring or transitioning from Jerkovich onto his receiving threats, I think he's got 3 really good ones. I think first you got to look at the tight end, Hunter Long, who has been such a safety valve for him, leads the team with 35 catches. That's an average of 7 per game. So he's a great outlet. And then you mentioned Zay Flowers. He's kind of their big play threat. He's gotten in the end zone, I think, 4 times now. And then the third name I'd throw in there as well is Jalen Gill, an Ohio State transfer, who's had 16 catches this year. That's more than double what he had his 2 years in Columbus. So, keep in mind, I've mentioned 4 players, and 2 of them are transfers from Ohio State and Notre Dame. So this is an offense that has some talent. So I think for them, I think it's going to be key being able to have some success in the passing game. And I think that's a really interesting matchup, because you ask any Georgia Tech fan, coach, student athlete, whomever that follows the program, they'll tell you probably the greatest area of depth and talent on their roster offense or defense, is at the cornerback position. So that's a matchup I'm really interested to see. We talked some about it going into Clemson, and with all due respect to Dracovic and the rest of that cast of receivers up in Chestnut Hill that are not who Georgia Tech just saw. So I do think that'll be a big part of that game. I think Zamari Walton will be key. I think he's made some serious strides. Earned 21 defensive back. He's a guy who didn't start playing football until he was really a junior in high school. So he's still learning the game, and he picked off Trevor Lawrence. Now I think he'd be the first one to tell you that the hit that Lawrence sustained as he let the ball was certainly played a factor, and he probably owes his defensive line some credit too for that interception. But he's getting better. And then I think, when you got Wanye Thomas and Tariq Carpenter at the safety spots, and Avery Shoel as well, who's really started to see some playing time, I think this is a secondary and a Boston College passing game that, in my book, could very well decide the game.
Yeah, we'll have to see because, like I said, both these teams are coming off some, in Georgia Tech's case, a very brutal loss. In Boston College's case, it wasn't as bad. So what do you think what's your final predictions on this game? Who do you think is going to get the win? I know you got that. Yeah, I know you work with them and all.
I'll put it this way. I'm tempted to invoke the old Kirk Herbstreit rule, where if you're on the broadcast of the game, you don't pick it.
Right.
But no, I might stick with that. I will say this: I do think Georgia Tech is going to have more success running the ball. Right. That's tough to do against a defense like Clemson. Boston College gave up 350 yards on the ground last week against Virginia Tech, and I think not only did Boston College struggle to stop the run, I do think Georgia Tech, for as good as Sims has been through the air, I still think their most reliable option for offensive consistency is on the ground. And I think despite missing Jordan Mason, who I'm not sure we mentioned that enough nowadays because Gibbs has come on and Jamal Griffin and Dante Smith have both been so good, but Jordan Mason, that's an all-ACC caliber running back that's been on the sideline for the last several weeks. And, we'll have to see what his status is going into this week. That yet to be announced. And quite candidly, it may not be announced until, we either see him on the field in pads or not on Saturday at 4 o'clock. So, I think that'll be a big deciding factor. Let's put it this way. I'm not going to be picking Boston College. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to equate this kind of like a boxing match. Georgia Tech got knocked out with the right hook last week versus Clemson. But, they got to be like Rocky, man. They got to get back up. They got to keep fighting. They're going to get back up and have some energy with them this week. I think Coach Collins is really going to use that loss last week to kind of motivate his team and go out there and try to run through Boston College. Not beat them, but, kind of get a couple more extra points on there to show who they are. I'll go with Georgia Tech by 2 touchdowns. That's what I'm going to go with. I feel confident in that. I feel confident in them getting that just because I think that offense is really going to get clicking this week, and they're not going up against that stacked Clemson offense and defense, so it's going to be a little bit easier for them. And, I got Tech by 2 touchdowns. So, like I said, you do work for Georgia Tech as the sideline reporter and the pregame and postgame host. But you also have another job going on in the city of Atlanta. Why don't you tell everyone about that with your work as one of the Falcons statisticians?
Yeah, it was a really cool opportunity that kind of landed in my lap actually prior to the 2016 season. So this is my 5th year. And for those that know, that 2016 season was a pretty good year to start. It was the last year in the Dome. And we saw the Falcons go all the way to the Super Bowl. And like we said, we don't need to focus on some negatives. But it was a really exciting run. And so I've been doing that the last 5 years. And to me, it's really changed how I watch football, or at least how I look at stats, I should say. I'm still, let me be very upfront. I am still a firm believer in that you've got human beings on the field who have emotions and tempers,
right,
and at some point injuries and all that type of stuff. And I think that, to me, is really a very rich part of the game, and probably why I like it so much is because of that stuff. With that said, I've really enjoyed just experiencing, what it's like to stat an NFL game. It is such a just whirlwind with how fast it moves. I know the World Series is coming up this week, and baseball scoring. I've done a good bit of that in my time, over at with the Braves, but it is so much different when you're doing football. And basketball, I'm sure, is the same way. But it's really interesting, and I think it's something that I'm not sure a lot of people understand very well.
So let me just ask you a question about this. Whenever you kind of went into this, did you just kind of base it off of you were just like, okay, I'm just going to look at like passing yards and rushing yards and all that kind of stuff? Or are you now kind of getting more into the in-depth kind of sides with the statistics, like, all the convoluted kind of sabermetrics that a lot of these stat junkies are well aware of? Are you getting more into that, or are you still more of kind of like a traditional statistician?
I'll look at both of them. I think there's value in both, and I think the key when it comes to those types of things is you can't just be handed a ream of paper or a ream of stats, I should say, and just absorb it all. I think you got to pick and choose, make sure what you're seeing on paper matches what your eyes seen, and I think so much of good statistical work is asking the right question. I think that is something that I think some people can get lost in. People will go and look in the data for answers without having a question in mind. And I think that's you can, really come to some misleading conclusions, and B, and perhaps more importantly, I think it's dangerous to do that because I can speak from experience. My head will start to spin if I just start looking at that stuff. You got to make sure, it's almost like you're, you got to tether yourself back before you go into the maze, or else you'll get lost in there and not get out for hours. But no, it's again, and to be clear, I'm not so much a statistical analyst for the Falcons. I'm more just a recorder of the play-by-play. We've got a crew of 8 guys led by our lead Joe Sterniolo, who's been doing it for I think decades at this point. So he was the guy who had me come on, and oddly enough, was actually Harrison Butker. Tech kicker is actually his high school kicking coach.
Yeah.
So that was, again, with the Georgia Tech connection, that helped things. And but like I said, I think for us, it's our whole goal is just getting the play-by-play in there as quickly as possible. And it's funny, we kind of have two masters to serve, if you will. One is both coaching staffs, because as soon as they hop on that bus in the NFL, they've got their tablets lined up, and every single play needs to be ready to go, matched up with the video and synced that way. And then the second boss we kind of have to appease, which, don't tell any of the coaches I say this might actually be important, but it's all the fantasy football. It's wild because, Logan, I think one of the biggest criticisms I got the first couple of years of doing that was, if it's a scoring play, don't automatically enter it, because as soon as you press enter, everybody's fantasy football teams are getting 6 points out of there. And if it gets overturned, then all of a sudden we got a bunch of irate fantasy football players, and they're complaining, why did my score go up and that stuff. So it's funny, and I'm sure some of that goes to gambling as well, especially nowadays where it's more and more common. But I think that's something that, it's just it is pretty wild sitting there and you're pressing keys and typing in things, and unfortunately they watch us like a hawk. So if I've got say a Calvin Ridley on my fantasy team, I can't exactly juice the books to help out a fantasy football team.
Yeah, definitely a different view of the game. I'm sure it's a lot different than just kind of sitting at home and watching a game. I'm sure, if you ever have an off day, you just like, okay, do I need to put this in? Do I need to? It's like, you're the one checking the fantasy stats at that point. You're not putting them in. You're seeing if your team's doing good and all that. But that's awesome, man. I'm sure that's a great experience for you, and that I'm sure you love doing that, working with the Falcons as well. Yeah. They got their first win the other day, so I'm sure that's a high hopes. There you go. So why don't you tell everyone at home, watching the video on Facebook and YouTube, and everyone listening to the podcast, where they can find you, where they can connect with you.
Yeah, so I think I'm probably most active on Twitter. It's at Wiley_Ballard, and then you can always hear me on the Georgia Tech Sports Network from Learfield IMG College every Saturday, or whenever Georgia Tech is playing. We'll be on there at 2:00 this Saturday. It'll be Sean Bedford and I on the pregame show, and then Andy Demetra and Sean will have the call during the game. And it's funny, we've had to be a little creative this year when it comes to sideline reports with the coronavirus, but I'll still pop in a few of those here and there, and then catch up with the with the players and Coach Jeff Collins following the game. So, but yeah, I'd say social Twitter, like I said, is probably where I'm most active. And keep in mind the TuneIn app. the Georgia Tech Game Day app as well. You can catch our broadcasts throughout the season.
Yeah, so guys, if you like this, if you like this video, be sure to check out Wiley on game days, working with Georgia Tech and all. Let them know that we sent you if that happens. But if you guys like this video on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, be sure to like, comment, and share. We're doing some awesome work over on our YouTube and Facebook page, man. We're loving all the fans over there. We're going to be sure to share this in a bunch of the Georgia Tech groups. We're going to get your name out there, Wiley. Let them know, people who don't know who you are. We're going to get you over there, man. You're going to get some more Twitter followers. I can give you that. But, guys, we got the podcast as well on Spotify and Apple. This video right here will be up, right as soon as this is over. We'll get this up on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcast as well. Get you some audio experience as well. So if you guys like this, like, comment, and share. And, for my guest, Wiley Ballard, thank you for coming on the show, man. Appreciate you having on. And I'm your host, Logan Landers. So this has been 100 Yards Football Sports Talk Radio. We